A man gains more than he anticipated as a result of his romance with the investment banker's wife. Soon after, he finds himself at the center of a dispute brought on by a strange death and a sizable life insurance policy. Actually, this guy learned the hard way that not all that glitter is gold. Greetings from RH Recap. We'll be discussing the 2015 thriller, Careful What You Wish For, in today's video. It's time to recall. Let's get started. Turn on subtitles and be cautious of spoilers ahead. The film begins with a man's voiceover saying that when you're a kid, you don't think about the consequences, and you feel invincible and that people tell you all these things about repercussions and stuff like that. But there's one thing about summer, and that anything can happen, and in this man's case, it did. As Doug enters a town, we see a shot of people having fun on the beach. He is reading a book when he glances up to behold a stunning vista of the beach. Taken into town with his parents, and when they unload their belongings, her mother jokingly wonders if he has enough books. Their residence is right close to a pier with a few of boats moored. Doug walks down there and meets one of his pals, who tells him about the women that have arrived and how ludicrous the scenario is and how quickly he can get laid. The two then proceed down the pier to a pub where a man takes out the cord for the electronics, causing the band to stop playing. He gets a few boos, but then he starts playing guitar with the band, which the audience enjoys. Doug's friend then hands him an apron and declares that summer has begun. When Doug returns home, he shouts to let everyone know he's home, but no one is there. So he goes up to his room and is looking at some pictures when he notices a new couple has moved in through the window. The wife is lovely, and he attempts to catch her eye, but she disappears into her house. Elliot and Lena are here. Doug continues to stare at Lena, but she glances up, startling Doug, and he moves away from there. Later, he rides his bike and happens to see Lena as she bends down to clean sand from her shoes. Doug then walks to his pal, and they begin talking about girls once more. When they hear laughter on the other side of the beach, the two take a mattress to an old boat shed. The two then crack open their beers as his friend assures him that he will have a fantastic summer. When he gets home, he notices that his neighbors have moved in. His father unexpectedly calls him and takes him to meet the new neighbors. Elliot tells Doug that his father has informed him that he knows a lot about boats, and Elliot invites him to come look at his new boat and that he might even hire him because it pays considerably more than mowing lawns. The next day, Elliot goes to inspect the boat and sees Lena returning from a swim. While she proceeds to take a shower, he continues to observe her. Lena removes all of her clothes, and Doug is staring at her when Elliot appears and inquires about the boat. Doug informs him that the damage is primarily cosmetic, and Elliot informs him that he may be leaving for a while. The two then talk about Elliot's salary and settle on $12, but Elliot says he would have paid him $20. Later, Doug is staring through his windows towards his neighbor's house and notices Lena changing when Elliot enters the room and tries to push himself on his wife, causing Doug to look away. The next day, Elliot travels to the seaside and is stopped by a security who informs him that he must check his identity. Doug approaches Elliot and informs him that the guard is a bit strict. Elliot simply says that he likes it this way. Doug asks Elliot how he got all of these stuff while the two are standing on his boat, and Elliot says that it was all possible due of money and good looks. Elliot sees Lena coming past again the next day when he hears a scream. He rushes out to find Lena standing near the car, as if there is a spider inside. He removes the spider and kills it. He then fixes the automobile for Lena but becomes embarrassed when she approaches. He informs his friend about this meeting, who advises him to be cautious with the husband because he does not appear to be a guy Doug would want to mess with. On his way home from work, Doug encounters Lena, who is sitting on her porch. She informs him that she has locked herself out of the house and will require his assistance to get in. She then requested him to keep things between them a secret because Elliot had asked her to look after herself. When it begins to rain, Lena asks him to grab a rock, break the back window, and enter so he can open the door. Doug manages to get in and open the door for her. She welcomes him in for a drink and hands him a beer. The two begin talking, and she mentions that he has a cut. She begins to clean and seductively assures him that he will live. Doug then kisses Lena and apologizes, but she continues to ignore and tells him to try again, but this time kiss better. They start kissing, and then Lena starts undressing. Doug assists her in taking her clothes off, and they end up having sex. They wake up in bed together the next day. Lena compliments him on his performance the night before and inquires whether he has ever been with a girl. He playfully refers to their sex as his third time, and Lena then falls asleep next to him. Doug returns home and even smiles to himself as he recalls his time with Lena. He then goes to see his friend, who tells him that he phoned on him the night before and plays a voice that is not Doug moaning. He then shows her a couple of girls with whom she can have sex, but Doug dismisses him. Doug continues to stare at Lena and begins working out for her over the next few days. He's working on the boat when Lena approaches him again and tells him that her husband instructed her to check on him. When they get into the boat, Lena asks him to close the cover and begins flirting with him. She starts taking off her clothing again and they end up kissing again, which leads to sexual contact. Doug was working at the bar that night when he noticed Lena and her husband walk in. His friend approaches him from behind and points to a couple of girls, telling him that he has a good feeling about tonight. Doug is riding his bike by the next day when he notices Elliot stopped next to a store. He comes to a halt and enters the store where he finds Lena. They then exit through the back door and have sex, while Elliot enters the store looking for Lena. They come to a halt when they hear him approaching, and Lena kisses Doug before returning. Elliot later inspects the boat that Doug is repairing and informs him of the mistake before lecturing him on why he is being so tough. He believes Doug reminds him of himself and that he works hard. He also claims to be leaving town. Doug takes advantage of this by going to meet Lena and having a picnic on the bed. They have an intimate talk and Lena gets him a phone. She informs him that Elliot is a paranoid man and that the phone will facilitate their conversation. Doug goes to the kitchen and Lena follows, but the gardener notices them. Later, Doug returns to the waterfront and notices Elliot standing close to his boat. He walks hesitantly approaching the boat and notices that Lena is on board. He then requests that Doug take the boat out to ensure if it is seaworthy. Elliot is almost hit by a beam during the ride, but he manages to duck. Elliot then claims that Doug was trying to give him dating advice and asks whether he has a girlfriend. Doug confirms that he does. The boat's engine suddenly fails, and Elliot steps inside to investigate. Lena takes a moment to tell him that she is thinking of divorcing Elliot. He then comes out and requests that Doug repair it. Later that night, he receives a phone call from Lena, who is crying and informs him that Elliot abused her and that he is on business. Doug drives to the hospital and tells her she needs to call the cops, but she stops him and they return home. Later, he is working when he receives a phone call from Lena, who is sunbathing near the shore. He accepts her invitation, and they end up having sex in a boat cabin. Lena tells him she feels at ease with him. Lena then informs him about her husband's first wife, with whom he is still fighting in court. Doug's friends then inquire about his activities and inform him that he is seeing someone, but Doug dismisses these remarks. He then returns home and notices Elliot has returned. He receives a call from Lena. He hurries to his room and telephones Lena, who is standing behind him. She urges him to come over immediately because she requires him. Doug runs to her house and discovers that Elliot and Lena got into an argument and she whacked him on the head with something. Elliot is discovered to be dead and Lena attempts to get assistance from Doug. Lena tells her she can't get in trouble with him and asks him what she should do. Doug then tells her that they will figure it out and that they must act normally. He goes to work at the bar and returns home to find that Lena has come to meet his parents. After an unpleasant exchange, Doug goes up to his room. Later that night, he goes to Lena's house, and she apologizes for being unable to stay, so she goes over to his parents' house. Doug suggests that they make it out to be an accident, but Lena informs him that this will not work. So Doug devises a new strategy, transporting Elliot's body to his boat and telling Lena that she will inform the officers that they had a dispute and Elliot fled the house. Just as the boat is about to leave, a security guard recognizes Doug and addresses him as Mr. Harper, but Doug impersonates Elliot and steals the boat. The cops arrive at Lena's house in the morning to investigate what appears to be an accident. He notices Lena speaking with the cops. Doug used a beam from the ship to injure Doug's head again, and then set fire to the boat using alcohol and a cigarette. Doug then goes about his normal business, serving a pair of cops who are discussing the incident. Later, a woman is seen driving to town. She goes to the police station and informs them that the LA Trust is treating the situation very seriously. Elliot had a sizable insurance fund, which is now going to Lena, therefore they are looking into any wrongdoing. The woman proceeds to examine what happened, questioning Lena about everything that happened and whether the two had been sleeping together. Lena responds that she has had no extramarital affairs and then stands up, irritated by the investigators' queries. The cops are also looking into the case, and the waterfront guard informs them that he may have a suspect from that night. The cops then begin talking to Doug's father, and Doug inquires about the suspects, telling him that he thought he saw Elliot that night, but it may have been someone else. The previous insurance agent returns to the house to inspect the crime scene. She discovers the smashed glass window Doug left the first night he met Lena. The police also question Doug's friend, who informs them that Doug may be seeing someone. Doug becomes enraged and departs. Later that night, the agent arrives at Doug's house and inquires about the night Lena paid them a visit. She informs them that they would like to see Doug. At this point, Doug is panicked and attempts to call Lena, but the call is disconnected when his parents return to the car. Doug then responds to a few inquiries at the police station, and the agent inquires about Elliot's relationship with Lena. The agent attempts to persuade Doug to divulge the facts, but his mother steps in and tells the agent that she will not allow her to frame her son. Lena sends Doug a note, asking him to meet her in the boatyard. Lena informs her that they will have to remain apart for a bit and then departs. When Doug returns home, the investigator has returned and informs him that she needs his fingerprints and a mouth swab. They put Doug in the car, and the agent begins questioning him, but Doug does not respond. Doug then tells his friend and parents about his condition. Meanwhile, the cops find a match for the blood sample provided by the agent. Doug's attempts to prove his innocence are constantly hampered, presumably by Lena. For example, a Harper's gardener who saw Doug and Lena together is murdered before the police can question him. Doug, on the other hand, escapes on his bike. He goes to the watershed and meets Lena. Just as he arrives, Lena shreds her clothes and begins screaming for him to let her go. She tries to make it look like an attempted rape. When the cops arrest Doug, he tells them that they know who he is and that he needs to do something to clear his name. So one cop lets him go and he rushes to Lena's motel to steal her cell phone. But just as he's about to look for the phone, Lena and the agent walk in. He claims that the phone contains complete proof of his innocence. Doug notes that the two women have the same matching tattoo as they walk away. Doug learns at this point that the agent is Lena's lover and has been her partner since the beginning. Everything flashes back to him as he understands he was only a piece in a larger game. At first, it appears that Lena will abandon Doug to face the charges, but in a final act of love, she decides to leave Doug the cell phone, which has the exonerating evidence he requires. After claiming Elliot's insurance cash, the women are pictured flying away in a plane. Just before the film closes, Doug tells how he was eventually sent to prison, although on lesser charges for a brief time. Lena and her companion are still on the run. He thinks about if he would do it all over again. Thank you for taking the time to watch. Please like, subscribe, and click the bell icon to get new movie recaps.